Alright, so let's get into Berserk, The Guardians of Desire, Chapter 3. Now to start off this chapter, I want to pose a question. This tall man standing next to Dahl right here, he claimed that he was stronger than Zondark. What is his name? Alright, so we pick up where we left off. Guts is entering the castle and he's walking up the stairs. We then see the Count walking through the hallways with a caged up Puck. So it turns out that Puck, even though he tried to help and save Vargas, he ended up getting caught himself. I'm going to pose another question for you guys. The Count also goes by another name. What is that name? Pause the video if you don't want to be spoiled. Otherwise, the answer is Slug Baron. Now you're probably wondering where this comes from. There was actually an interview in the official guidebook for Berserk in which Kentaro Miura referred to the Count as Slug Baron. Now, Puck laments the fact that he wasn't able to do a single thing to save Vargas, and he's wondering what's going to happen next. We then see the Count open a door to a room in which a small girl is sitting on the bed, and she responds, "Father?" And we find out very quickly that the girl's name is Teresa. Now the Count presents Puck as a gift to Teresa, and he's wondering if she likes it. Now by all indications, it looks like she does like the present. The Count mentions that he doesn't want to let Teresa out into the world yet because it's still impure, and he's got to get rid of all the filthy heretics. Now he looks to embrace her or hug her or something, but she absolutely panics and just goes into a fit. And he gets very angered and perturbed by this, and he's like, "You still won't let me touch you." Now he bids her goodnight, and she looks to tell him something, but she's like, just forget it. Now, outside the room, Dahl tries to consult the Count, but, he's just seething with anger right now, and he's just like, "Leave me be." We then see him in emotional distress, but then he notices that the Black Swordsman has entered his castle, and he gets a devilish smile on his face. Now, as Guts is walking up the stairs, he sees the shadow of a vicious monster. And it turns out to be an even more monstrous, grotesque form of the Count / Zondark. And I love this little quip by Guts here. "You're prettier than the last time I saw you." The Count-controlled Zondark then begins to flail his arms around and looks even more menacing than the last time they fought. Guts proceeds to pull out his crossbow and begins shooting at the Count, and it looks like he deals some significant damage. Unfortunately, this monster is very resilient and just attacks Guts right away. Guts then realizes that arrows aren't going to do the job, so he whips out his Dragon Slayer and slashes across the Count's chest. Now that portion of the Count's body begins to fall down the stairs, and it looks like it's all over, so Guts is like, okay, I'll resume my normal business and get back to work here. Unfortunately, he gets hit from behind by one of the tentacles. Now as the Zondark / Count monster comes up to Guts, he mentions the fact that if he gets cut in half, he just keeps regenerating and gets stronger. And as we can see, his body doesn't even look like a human at this point. We can only see part of Zondark's face. We can't even see like his arms or legs or anything. It's just a monstrous entity at this point. Now, like every bad guy in an action movie, he gave away a little bit too much information and said, "I can't be killed unless you cut my head off," which Guts proceeds to do right away. And what a badass looking panel this is right here. Guts holding the top half of the Count's head right on top of his Dragon Slayer. However, the Count's head is very resilient here. He begins to manifest these tentacles that start wrapping around Guts' sword and claims that he'll feed off of Guts' body just like he fed off of Zondark's body. So even though it's very easy to cut the parasite, destroying it completely is a different matter. This has got to be one of the coolest deaths in all of Berserk, because Guts decides that he's going to take his sword with the Count stuck on it and smash it up against the wall, just like you would smash a fly with a fly swatter. Now unfortunately for Guts, the Count parasite warns him that, well, this is only a part of me. I'll be waiting for you upstairs. So this was just the appetizer. The main course is still to come. Now Guts is getting very tired at this point. He's lost a lot of blood, he's getting a little bit woozy, but he reminds himself that he can't give up. Now, inside of Teresa's room, Puck begins to wonder if Teresa's gonna eat him, but she's like, "No, I'm not gonna do anything like that." Now, Teresa's like, "Well, I understand why you don't trust me. I am the Count's daughter after all, but he's a different person since that day 7 years ago when her mother died." Now, she mentions that 7 years ago, she was just a baby. Now, that's kind of interesting because that would suggest that Teresa's only 7 or 8 years old right now? Because I would have guessed she's at least 13, 14 years old. She looks like she's the same age as like Shirka or something, or like even Jill in the Misty Valley, but I guess 7 or 8, but Mira did not draw her that way. She looks a lot older than that. Now, she mentions that there was a sect of heretics that opposed her father, and one day they kidnapped her mother and threatened to kill her if her father didn't let them practice their pagan worship. And because father couldn't do this without the consent of the king, they ended up killing her. Now, what's very interesting here is in the background you see a picture of the Baphomet. Now, it's very interesting because the Baphomet has a very long and storied history. It's even suggested that it was a deity of the Knights of Templar. Now, I think most people are familiar with the Baphomet because of Aleister Crowley and Thelema. And Thelema was essentially a esoteric religion, a cult if you will, that stated that the Baphomet was a representation of spiritual nature of the spermatozoa, while also being symbolic of the magical child produced by the result of sex magic. And this will make sense in a future chapter, but for the purposes of this chapter, just kind of keep that information in the back of your mind. Teresa mentions that her mother was sacrificed alive as an offering to their evil god. Now, even though Teresa acknowledges that her father is rather harsh, she mentions that he was respected by his enemies and allies alike. But unfortunately, 7 years ago, that all changed. And that's when he started hunting down heretics like his life depended upon it. Now, Puck tries to cheer her up as she begins to cry, and she even mentions that it feels like he's not even human anymore. Now, we see Guts roaming the hallways as he takes down 2 castle soldiers. He then walks up a flight of stairs and encounters Dahl and a group of soldiers. Now, feeling like he has the upper hand, Dahl recommends that the Black Swordsman should just surrender quietly. But Guts is not having any of it. He just tells him to move. You're in my way. Move. Now Dahl's like, you really think you can take down 50 of our troops? As he commands the archers to shoot at Guts. Now, Guts takes his cloak, shields himself with it, and uses his Dragon Slayer to protect himself. He then goes on the offensive and slashes through many soldiers at once. Dahl commands the other soldiers to attack, but Guts is just hacking and slashing them like it's nothing. Now, realizing that average foot soldiers aren't going to do much against the Black Swordsman, Dahl calls upon the strongest man. A man that apparently is supposed to be stronger than Zondark. And now the answer to the question I asked at the beginning, this man's name is Jericho. Now the man takes his mace and starts swinging it around and goes straight towards Guts. But Guts, unfazed, takes his Dragon Slayer and slashes through Jericho's shield. Now Jericho's in a daze, he doesn't know what to do next, and Guts proceeds to just hack him right in half. And goddamn, what an absolutely epic panel this is. Guts slashing through Jericho and slashing through the pillar all in one swing. Let's just hope that wasn't a load-bearing pillar right there, otherwise they're all in trouble. And I just love the face on Jericho and Dahl here, as Jericho's body is just slashed in half, and it's just a beautiful panel. Now Dahl realizes that, that was my strongest soldier. He's just going through our soldiers like it's nothing. I'm not the one in control anymore. Back to Teresa and Puck. She apologizes for crying so much since she hasn't had anyone to talk to in so long. She then asks him what it's like to fly. Puck responds by saying, it's normal, I guess. It's the same as for birds or bugs. Now this is a metaphor because Teresa is obviously a trapped bird in a cage here, and she's wondering what it's like to be out in the world, actually talking to people, conversing, making friends, being a part of society. She's essentially a trapped bird, and she wants to know what it's like to just be free and to fly around as it were. And she even mentions the fact that this is essentially her world, and she only gets this little piece of the sky, this little piece of freedom. She then notices that the soldiers say that a burglar or intruder has entered the compound. And Puck realizes that this must be Guts and he's got to get going. Teresa doesn't want Puck to leave though. This is the first friend that she's ever had in her life, her first companion, and he's gone just like that. But she realizes that he needs to help out his friends, so it is what it is. Puck then escapes through the window as she watches him fly off. However, Puck decides to return for just a bit and says that he'll be back to see her later, which gives Teresa absolute joy and exuberance. It's really great to see this smile on her face. She then gets a little bit nervous thinking about the notion of actually leaving the room itself. Puck then begins to wonder if it's actually true that the Count lost his wife, and that's the reason that he acquired his demonic powers, and that's the reason that he summoned the God Hand. We then see Guts kick Dahl through the room, and Dahl is just absolutely bloodied up and bruised from this. So even an old minister that can't even defend himself, Guts just has no empathy for him whatsoever. And then we got an absolutely gorgeous panel here with, Guts' cloak going across his body, body. He's got his Dragon Slayer on his shoulder and back. It's just an absolutely epic panel here. And I think it's kind of interesting too, because the way that his bandages are over his head, it kind of looks like he's got an eye patch on. And if you've ever read the Berserk prototype, Kentaro Miura actually drew Guts with an eye patch on. So I'm wondering why Kentaro Miura decided to abandon that idea. I'm wondering if he thought it was too cliched or if he just didn't like the aesthetics of it. Not really sure. The Count is waiting for Guts in his chair and he's like, come on and test me. Now Guts approaches the Count, but as he's walking up the stairs, he drives his sword into the concrete, realizing that the Count set a trap for him. Now the Count pays Guts a compliment by saying nicely countered, but he starts attacking once more. And then we get a really nice shot of the Count's, large tentacle here. It's just kind of rising up and it just looks absolutely monstrous. And this is the first time in the manga that we really see that Guts looks really nervous and a little bit worried that he might not be able to defeat this apostle. Now, Puck gets lost on his way to the Count's quarters, but lucky for him, one of the walls ends up breaking and he just kind of stumbles upon the Count. The Count then looks to grab Guts and says, "I'll crush you." And we get a really nice full-page spread here with the Count and Guts, just absolutely magnificent. I mean, words can't do it justice. It's just such a high level of art here. It's simply amazing. And now Dahl gets a look at the Count, and he's absolutely horrified, but Guts has got no time to react to this. He's just got to start hacking away and hope for the best. And again, the Count reminds Guts that it's futile to slice him up, because every time he does so, he gets bigger and stronger. Now, because the Count is taking down many pillars within the palace, Teresa's room begins to crumble and the doors begin to open up. She then walks over to the door, gets a little bit nervous, but remembers Puck and decides that she's got to get the courage to walk out by herself. Meanwhile, Guts is hiding from the Count. He's using the various pillars to stay out of his line of vision. And as the Count is looking for the Black Swordsman, Guts decides that he's got an idea, and he's looking directly at Dahl. The Count then thinks he's found the Black Swordsman. He sees the cloak behind one of the pillars, and decides to just crush it down. Unfortunately for him, it was merely Dahl wearing the cloak of the Black Swordsman. We then see Guts off to the side as he lunges forward and slices into the Count. Unfortunately for Guts, this was just a surface wound, and he gets whipped right back. And with Dahl dead and Guts wounded, Puck can merely look on in absolute horror. Now the Count acknowledges Guts' quick thinking, however he claims that it's irrational to think that he can defeat him, considering the fact that he is beyond human. He then says it's impossible for someone with a brand on their neck to be able to survive this long. And he reminds them that because of that brand, he's engaging in a war of pain and fear. And it's just meaningless to keep fighting on and on like he is. And thus he recommends that he should end it now and just be done with his misery. And then we have a really nice line by the Count here. He says, "Divine providence cannot be thwarted by man's efforts." And this is a rare moment for the Berserk manga because it's very rare to see Guts in absolute dread and sorrow like this. You never see him scared, and this is one of those few times. The Count then begins to batter him around even more. He grabs onto his leg with one of his tentacles and just starts whipping him around. And this one panel here where Guts is just thrown into one of the pillars as it cracks down, and then you just see him hung over a pillar, in absolute pain. It looks like he might be passed out. I mean, it's just a very sad sight, and you really feel for the guy as well. You can't imagine how much pain he is in right now. And then the final scene of the chapter just has the Count looking down at Guts, laughing as he looks down at his helpless prey.